After over a week of testing, over 20 rotations made, over 50 battles completed, I can finally answer the following questions. Which role is the best role for the twins? If you can only pick one, do you go for A1 or 5-star weapon? How good or bad are the twins actually? And finally, are they worth pulling? Welcome to a series where I provide you with my 100% unbiased opinion on the twins after many hours of testing. If you want to see more of this for future characters, consider liking and subscribing. This video especially took a while because the twins are literally dumb. Like literally dumb, so I had to quadruple my workload to test all the roles. So of course, let's start off with the kit themselves. They definitely have the most complicated kit in the game, and I'm going to try my best to summarize this quite simply. And we can do that by talking about the skills individually first, and also its corresponding highlight. Then I'll talk about the roles with the skill pairing. The first skill is a Fire and Ice skill, which gives a party attack buff, and the highlight is a very good one. It increases the party's attack and damage for 2 turns. The second skill is Electric and Wind. It decreases party's damage taken, and then you also heal the party. So this is a sustain skill. The highlight is also a sustain highlight, which heals and also increase max party's HP. Then we have the Psy and Nuke skill, which increases Justine and Caroline's pierce rate as well as the DPS's pierce rate. The highlight increases the attack of the twins as well as the DPS. And the last skill we have is a Bless and Curse one. This one increases the twins' own attack as well as damage dealt and also win rate. So this skill is mostly for DPS because it buffs their own stats. As for the highlight, this one is an AoE attack. So these are only AoE highlight excluding the skill 3, and it's a Bless and Curse highlight and also increases the attack and crit damage for 2 turns. Other than the skill, we can quickly talk about its passive first. So this passive is basically the stat requirements for Justine and Caroline. So you need 4500 attack, you need 30% damage multiplier and 190% crit damage. You need this to get the desired level, which is required to buff your skill because your skill scales on this desired level thing. So you want to make sure you read the requirement at the start of the battle, so including the navigator stats. With the skills out of the way, let's talk about the roles themselves. The first one, we have Assassin. The Assassin role is going to have the Psy and Nuke for pierce rate, as well as the Bless and Curse for the twins' own stat increase. And for the skill 3, which you can only use when you have 2 facades. So you get a facade by using the skill 1 and skill 2. So this skill 3 will do almighty damage, and you will also have an effect based on the role you have. So for the Assassin role, you're going to get 4.9% effect stats from your DPS. So basically just some free stats for the twins. And for the other passive, we increase crit damage for the twins themselves by 30%. As for the sweeper, it's going to be Fire Ice for party attack buff and also Bless Curse for again their own stats buff. For the skill 3, having 2 facade will change the skill 3 to AoE attack because it makes sense. This is a sweeper role. For the passive, the twins will have 15% more crit rate. Then for strategists, you have Fire and Ice for party's attack increase, and also Psy and Nuke for twins and DPS pierce rate increase. So both are buffing moves, which makes sense for a strategist role. Then when you use the skill 3, you get 14.6 skill amplification for 2 turns. Skill amplification is basically increasing the number of the skill multiplier. So your DPS damage, your buffing, debuffing skills will have higher number. So you're gonna do more damage, you're gonna buff more, you're gonna debuff more. And you're gonna heal more also, and you're gonna get more shields. This lasts for 2 turns. And also, you increase crit damage for your party. For the passive, the twins will have 5 more speed and also increase party's attack by 30%. For Saboteur, you have Electric and Wind, which is the healing one, and then Bless and Curse, which is a self-stat increase skill. For skill 3, you will inflict Shock, Windswept, and 2 curse stacks on the main target and gain 2 blessing stacks. And it also decreases all the opponent's defense. For the passive, the twins will have 5 more speed, and then the foes will take 24% more damage. For Guardian, you have Electric and Wind, which is the healing one, and Psy and Nuke, which is the pierce rate to twins and DPS. For the skill 3, you will give your party a shield and also get 1 down point, and also increase party's defense. For the passive, the twins will give 21% more shield to the party. And last but not least, we have the Medic. You get the Fire Ice skill, which is the party attack buff, and also healing skill with the Electric and Wind skill. For the skill 3, you will heal the party and also increase the party's damage dealt. And for the passive, you increase the healing by 21% and also increase party's damage by 24%. For the 5-star weapon, they increase the desired level by 10% after using a skill 3. And then every time you get a facade, which is from the skill 1, skill 2, you increase party's crit damage by 13% and also damage dealt by 13% for 2 turns. stack up to 2 times. So at max 2 stacks, it's a 26% crit damage and damage dealt increase. Moving on to awareness, at A0 you get the global passive, which is a wonder skill and highlight increase by one level. And depending the skills you choose, you will change your role, which I will not repeat any of this because I just explained. And then you also get a free 25 desire level increase. So if you fulfill the stats requirement, you get 75 there, and then from the A0 you get another 25, then you have 100 when you start the battle. At A1 you get 2 facade at the start of battle, which means you can trigger a skill tree immediately on the first turn. Then at the start of end of twins turns, if you have 2 types of facade, you will auto-activate skill 3 on a random target, prioritizing the target that you last hit. This basically changes the twins rotation because you do not need to use a skill tree anymore. For A2, when you get a facade, you gain effects based on the skill. So if you use a fire and ice skill, you get party attack buff by 30% for 2 turns. If you have the electric and wind skill, you will decrease party's damage taken by 20% for 2 turns. If you have the Psy and Nuke skill, you increase the crit damage of the DPS by 20% for 2 turns. Then if you have the Blast and Curse skill, you increase the twins skill damage by 10% for 2 turns. So this awareness is basically just a free buff. At A4, when the twins activate their highlight, you increase 40% attack and 20% damage dealt. And then you grant 50% of these effects to the other allies for 2 turns. At A6, you get another global passive. So at A6, you have a total of 2 level increase to Wonder Skill and Thief Tactics. Then at the start of battle, you gain 1 True Desire stack, which is something that you can activate in the battle, and you get this True Desire stack every 8 turns. And at the start of the twins turns, you can choose to spend the True Desire stack to enhance the next skill 3. And this enhance effect will activate all facade effects for the skill 3. So all 4 skills will be activated, and you also deal bonus damage to the main target equal to 40% of attack and hits 8 times. And each hit is a different element. For cards, it's very simple. The safest card is the Nativity and Power set, which is a new one. But if you need to, you can also change the card to Departure and Prosperity. You can use this Departure and Prosperity if you really need the Prosperity set and your other character or your other buffer don't really favor using it. Because Prosperity gives you faster highlight gauge, so you can highlight earlier. Another one you can do is actually Departure and Control if you require the defense debuff. So it's very situational to what you need. If you need defense debuff, Departure Control is not a bad option also, 23% defense, so it depends. You just need to do the defense calculations to confirm. But if you don't need any of that I just mentioned, just run Nativity and Power, because that will increase their desire level. Then it will increase also the effectiveness of their skills. And just make sure that, again, you hit the requirements. It's over 30% damage multiplier and over 190% crit multiplier. And my attack is not 4500, but it's fine because my navigator can easily give 700 here. So just make sure you check in battle that you have 105 desire level, because 100 from the passive and the A0, and then another 5 from Nativity and Power. For the skill rotation, it's very simple. For A0, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, because you need to use the 1 and 2 before using the 3. But if you are A1 and above, you can just do 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, because you can completely skip the skill 3. As for a team, there's no specific teams that select best for them, because they can be put literally into any team, because they can be anything also. So if you run them as a support strategist, which is the Fire Ice and Psy Nuke, you can just support your DPS like your Joker or something, or Haru. Then your other teammates will depend on who is your DPS. You can also run them as a medic. Run them as medic, then that means you don't need another sustain for the team. But if you're running them as DPS, like a assassin, then obviously you want characters that can buff your damage. Something like Chord or Leon. If you don't need sustain, if you need sustain, you can run Cherish or Marion. As for Navigator, it depends also. Futaba doesn't work the best for the twins because the skill tree doesn't hit weaknesses because it's almighty, but it still works. Futaba still debuffs defense and buff attack, which the twins need anyways. If you have Phoebe also works, even though the mixer can be a little bit wonky because the twin has like 3 different elements. And then of course you can also run Wind for defense debuff, and the skill tree also works. Okian if you really don't have the others for the attack buff. And then for the dagger also can be anything depending on your team. Persona also depends. So there's no specific team. You can just do whatever you want, just try things and see which one works best for you. Which role is the best for the twins? There are 6 total. Surely there's a singular best one, right? Before answering that, you can actually do some comparisons on some of the roles. Like for example, you can compare a strategist versus a saboteur. You can compare a medic against a guardian. But sweeper and assassin you can't really compare because they're like different things, right? But you can compare them to premium DPSs. So now let's compare the strategist and the saboteur. So you can very easily see that it's an over 20% increase when you compare strategies and Saboteur. Saboteur is just not that good. Saboteur kinda sucks actually. The thing about Saboteur, the reason why it sucks is because of the skills and the highlights. Because when you look at the skills of the Saboteur, you get the healing skill, which is useless for damage increase. And also this blast and curse skill, which is also useless because it's a buff to themselves, not the party. Which also means that the highlight is also very useless. The only two useful things for Saboteur is the skill 3, which can debuff defense and inflict the shock in swap. And also the passive, which can increase damage taken, which is also cool. But it's only these two things. Highlight skills, absolutely useless. You know, when you look at the strategies, you get stuff like party damage attack increase, you get pierce rate increase. Both the highlights are useful highlights that buff damage. And also, the skill tree gives you skill amplification and crit damage. These are all very useful things to buff damage. So I just find it very unfortunate that the Saboteur is just bad. I feel like it has potential. Maybe they can change the skill tree so that they can inflict every single element, or just add something new, you know, like something extra. Because right now, Saboteur is just not useful. And I don't see any reason to even use Saboteur over the strategies. Let's look at the Medic and the Guardian. This one also has a very clear winner. The Medic is better, but maybe 15% or more. The only thing I would say that the Guardian is better is going to be Sustain. Sustain is going to be a bit easier with Guardian because they give a lot of shield. But if you want damage and points, you definitely go for the Medic, because Medic is just better. The reason is also quite similar to why Strategy is better than Saboteur. The Medic just buffs more. It has the Fire Ice skill, which buffs party damage. Even the skill tree can also increase damage dealt, which the Guardian don't have. The passive itself also has a damage increase, which also the Guardian don't have. The only time I would say you will use Guardian over Medic is two things. If you want extra sustain, or you're doing a Fox tip, because the Guardian does buff defense and give you shield, which will be useful for Fox. Other than those two scenarios, I don't see why you want to use the Guardian over the Medic. Now here comes a bit of an interesting one. We have the twins DPS, both Sweeper and Assassin, against premium DPS. So I tested this on 3 different bosses. One for Summer Closer, one for Haru, one for Queen. And interestingly enough, the Sweeper actually beat Summer Closer. But okay, I want to clarify something. My Summer Closer only has a 4-star weapon, no 5-star weapon. So if she has a 5-star weapon, then the premium DPS, the Summer Closer will definitely out-damage the Twin Sweeper. But still, I think it's quite impressive that A0R0 can match A0 no 5-star weapon in Summer Closer. So I think this shows that the Sweeper Twins is actually pretty decent. Then for the other 2 DPS, this one is for the Haru one. The Haru is better. My Haru is A0R0, so without 5-star weapon, Twins might actually out-damage again. I didn't test that, but there's a chance. But still quite impressive, this number. And then for the Assassin, quite underperforming, I have to say. 70% lower than the Queen, which is quite big. To be fair, this boss is also quite RNG heavy with the elements and stuff, and the boss is also quite built for Queen. So it is going to be difficult to match a level for our own boss. But still gives you an idea of the difference. I would say the Sweeper is definitely better overall than the Assassin. And one fun thing I want to say is that Nidogger is weak to Bless. And the Twin Sweeper mode is also Bless. Or I guess half of it is Bless. So it makes sense for it to match the Summer Closer. Now for my final ranking of the roles, from worst to best, we're gonna have Saboteur, Guardian, Assassin, Sweeper, Medic, and the best one is gonna be Strategist. No surprises for the first two. The first two are really solid roles. For Strategists, they just buff a good amount of damage for the entire team. And for Medic, while the Sustain is not as good as your Guardian, also if your Twins is A0, Medic is gonna struggle a bit with Sustain. But if you can Sustain, Medic can give you a good damage boost. Sweeper is better than Assassin because I just find it do more damage. Then we have Guardian. Guardian is a bit lower here because you don't really need to run Guardian when you already have Medic, right? That's why I put it quite low. But of course, if you're using a Fox team, Guardian works better. And the worst is Saboteur, which I will explain why it sucks. There's just not a lot of buffs and debuffs that this role gives. A1 changes the rotation from 3 turns to 2 turns, making them more comfortable to use and making their buffs 100% uptime. Hence, you should go for A1 instead of the 5-star weapon. I think this statement is overused. I agree that A1 feels better to use, and seeing the skill tree go off every other turn is pretty satisfying, but feelings are not enough. You need numbers to back up the claim, and I will show you those numbers. This section will mainly talk about A0R0 versus A1. You can pick only one. Which one do you pick? Now let's take a look at this. Nidogger DOD. You can see that A1 barely outperforms A0. A0 is the one that has 4-star weapon, by the way, and it barely outperforms. And I will go as far as say that it doesn't outperform at all. Meanwhile, for 5-star weapon, you get a 6% increase. A1R0 is a higher increase, which is expected. And then A6R6 I just did it for fun. A6R6 is just broken, it's just double the points of A0. But that's not relevant for this test. What matters is these two. You can see that the points for A0R0 is higher, 5-star weapon is better than A1. Okay, you are probably thinking, brother, this is DOD, but only the last 2 weakened turns matter. Obviously the 5-star is gonna be better. You cannot draw conclusion on just this one fight alone. Well, you are absolutely right if that's the only boss I tested on, because I tested 5 more times across multiple different bosses, and most of them favor the A0R0. Only one that favors the A1 more is the Yasufusa guild boss. Personally, I didn't find it surprising at all, because I think most people underestimate the strength of the 5-star weapon. Just a quick refresher on what it does. It improves your desire level by 10%, and then gives a 26% crit damage and damage buff for 2 turns and max stacks. That's actually a really strong buff. And keep in mind that this 5-star weapon applies to every single role that you use the twins as. And the buff is also a team buff. Everybody on the team gets this buff, including the twins themselves. So if you go for purely A1, you will be missing that buff, and you'll be sacrificing that for convenience. Is that actually more worth it? That's for you to decide. I'm just here to provide you with numbers. Now, we do need to talk about the times when A1 is better than A0R0. There's actually 2 times. One time is actually shown on this table, and the reason is quite simple. It's because we're using the DPS twins, the assassin version. And the reason why A1 outperforms A0R0 when it comes to DPS, because A1 will unleash 2 extra skill 3 in the rotation. A0R0 only uses 2 skill 3, A1 uses 4 skill 3s, which means you hit more and hence you get more points. So that's mostly the reason. And when you look at the other one, the other DPS, which is the Haru boss, you can see that the difference is actually very, very small. The A0R0 and A1 is about the same, which kind of further proves my point that if you're running DPS for A1, they are generally going to be better because they hit more, which means they get you more points. And just remember that the skill 3 is also one of the main source of damage for the twins. So I just want to point out one more thing, is that I did use a medic for Yasufusa, which is a queen boss, and same thing as the strategist. The other 3 here is the strategist. The medic one also favors A0R0, so it's the same reason. The 5-star weapon is just strong. Just now I said this 2 times that A1 is going to be better than 5-star weapon. The first one I already mentioned is the DPS. When using DPS, A1 can outperform because of more damage, more skill 3. Another time where A1 is going to outperform 5-star weapon is when you're going to use them as a sustain. When I say sustain, I mean keeping your team alive. If you want to keep your team alive, you want to go for A1. For A0R0, it's going to be buff heal, skill 3, buff heal, skill 3. For A1, it's going to be buff heal, buff heal, buff heal. Just by comparing these two side by side, you have 1 extra healing from the A1. And that's not all. For A1, you get to use 4 skill 3s. And the skill 3 can also heal you, or give you shield if you're using Guardian. And that is 2 extra skill 3 compared to A0R0, which basically just means A1 is gonna tank better. They're gonna heal you better, they're gonna give you more shield, and so you'll have a higher chance of surviving the fight. So if you want to run the twins more as a sustain, I recommend A1. If not, or if you already have like good sustains, you can just go for A0R0. But ideally, you do want both A1 and 5-star weapon, because these 2 things actually complement each other quite well. Let's go back to the 5-star weapon. The 5-star weapon states that when you get a facade, you increase party's crit damage by 13% and damage dealt by 13% for 2 turns, stacks up to 2 times. The keyword is when a facade is gained. You gain a facade by using a skill 1 or a skill 2. If you're using A0R0, the rotation of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 means that there's going to be 2 turns where you're going to have only 1 stack of this buff, right? Because there's 2 turns you're going to use a skill 3. So if you have an A1 and the 5-star weapon, you can use a 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 rotation, and the weapon will also have 100% uptime because you're gonna get facade every single turn, because you completely skip a turn from manually using a skill 3. That is the most ideal case. And you can also see from data here, some of them has a pretty significant jump, especially for MLD, which is the one for 6 turns. DOD has lower increase because it's only the 2 turns matter. So if longer fights, it's gonna matter more. You can see a 13% jump to 12 to 22%, 12% jump to 20%. Quite a big jump from A0R0 to A1R0. So if you're on the gems, I do recommend just A1R0, then you don't have to worry about whatever, like all the problems I just mentioned. Stuff with tanking, the stuff with not having enough buffs from the 5-star weapon, and yeah. When I first made my first impression video, I made a comment that the twins and Leon are about the same strength. Then I received a comment saying that they are as strong as Chord, so they are not the same level as Leon. Then I replied, no way they are the same level as Chord. As for Leon, I have to test more to double confirm, but it's not looking good for the twins so far. To that, I want to formally apologize because my initial testings were wrong. At the time, I still wasn't familiar with how the twins work, but it's been a week. So now I know how to unleash their full potential. So who is better, twins or Chord? The answer is yes, because it depends on the team, depends on the DPS. So I've done a test on 2 bosses. One is a Haru boss, one is a Queen boss. I didn't think of testing this the week before with DoD, but just bear with me I guess. But anyways, you can see that twins does outperform Chord, 90 to 85, and Chord outperforms twins, 51 to 47. And Leon is the worst one obviously. I mean, Leon is good, but he's a 4-star weapon, so he is expected to perform worse than a premium 5-star like Chord and twins. But yeah, anyways, going back to these two, the reason why twins is better than Chord for Haru boss is because twins have a more consistent buff. They buff throughout the entire fight. Meanwhile, Chord favors more on DPSs that do big damage with their highlight, which is why Chord is better than twins for the Queen boss, because Queen's main source of damage comes from the highlight. Meanwhile, Haru's main source of damage comes from the gun, not from the highlight, which means twins would be better, and that makes sense. So by the end of the day, it really depends on who's your DPS. If you can afford it, you can even run Chord and twins together. They're gonna amplify even more damage together. Since we're on the topic of twins and Chord, I want to talk about their highlight. So for the twins, I want to specifically talk about the Fire and Ice highlight, the one that buffs attack and damage for 2 turns. This highlight is actually really strong, and I found it stronger than a Chord highlight. And when I say stronger, I don't mean like strength wise, because I believe Chord and twins Fire Ice highlight are about the same strength. But what makes the twins highlight better is that it lasts for 2 turns. Meanwhile, Chord's highlight only lasts for 4 actions, and that does make a difference. If you're running both twins and Chord highlight together, you do want to save the Fire Ice highlight from the twins on the last 2 turns, assuming of course you're running a strategist twin. Actually, even a medic twin also works because a medic twin is also Fire Ice. Which is also another reason why the twins medic form is very good. Now let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses, what I like and what I dislike about the twins. For this section is going to be me talking about my experience with the twins, things that I find annoying, things that I like about the twins, and also things that I haven't really touched on in the previous sections. So I'm going to start with the bad things first, and the first one is something I already mentioned, and it's that you need A1 to play sustain, because if the boss does like a moderate to high levels of damage, you're going to struggle to survive with an A0, R0 sustain tool. So you're kind of forced to use an A1 if you plan to use them as sustain. Of course, this is not relevant if you have a strong sustains already. Now the other thing I find a little bit annoying, it's not exactly a bad thing, but just annoying, is also with A1, specifically in DPS form. And the thing that I don't like is the skill 3 timing, because the skill 3 activates at turn 1, 2, 4 and 6. And usually when you do big damage, it's on turn 3 and 6. Which means that the skill 3 timing misses one of the burst turns. When most people, when you make rotations, we focus a lot on turn 3 and turn 6, because those are the big damage turns. So having skill 3 to do damage on turn 4, a little bit weird. A common example is with Dominion Cohesion, which you often use on turn 3 and turn 6. Now I want to talk about the A6 very quickly, because the thing is, right, when I first saw the A6, I was very disappointed that it was 8 turns. I was hoping that it's a typo and it's supposed to be 8 actions, but it's 8 turns. I was disappointed until I actually used the A6 twins. They are absolutely broken. Absolutely broken. And I'm kinda glad that I kept it at 8 turns and not 8 actions. It's very good, because the enhanced effect just triggers all of us up together, which means that you get every single buff that twin has for the skills, including the A2 as well, and you also do more damage because of the 8 hits. It's a very strong A6. A bit annoying that you can only use it once per battle, but I understand why they did that. The final bad thing I want to talk about the twins is a more personal one. It has nothing much to do with the game or the twins, I guess. It's a me problem basically. Because as cool as the kid of the twins are, I hope they don't do another character like a twin again. Because they are complicated, they have a lot of forms, so I need to do a lot of testings. So it's a little bit tiring. Okay, a little bit tiring is an understatement. And at the time of recording this video, the next update is in like a couple of days. So I need to edit this fast. it's time to move on to the good things. I do have quite a lot of good things to say about the twins, and the first one is quite a random one, but also kind of relevant, and is that they do not have any weaknesses, which means they cannot be knocked down unless it's a physical or gun hit or crits. I believe they are the first character that has this, excluding the navigators. The next, I guess, a good thing I want to talk about is the global passive. I don't know if to consider this a good or bad, but I mean, global passive is a buff to your account, so I guess I'll consider it good, but also not good because you have to pull this character to get this global passive, I guess. But anyways, global passive is good, but usually better at more competitive environments where you have strong characters, you own strong characters, and this global passive thing is gonna increase the points quite a bit. It's only a small buff to Wonder, but it does translate to big numbers, big raw number differences and higher awarenesses. Now I want to talk about the skill 3 of the strategist role. I don't see many people talk about this. It's actually pretty freaking strong. It's the skill amplification of 14.6%. So skill amplification is basically just a skill number increase. The skill can be any skill: Rakunda, Rebellion, Revolution, and not just Wonder. Leon skill 3, Chord skill 2, and your DPS's damage, and also all the highlights gets a buff from this skill amplification. There's a couple examples for you. Rakunda goes from 40.7% to 46.6%. That's almost a 6% increase. Chord skill 2 goes from a flat 1220 to 1398 attack buff. That's over 100 more attack. These are just 2 examples. Keep in mind that this skill amplification applies to every buff, every debuff, every damage, every highlight, as long as it's a skill or a highlight that has like a variable number that scales with level up. Then they get the buff from this skill amplification. This thing is also quite nice because it doesn't really, you cannot really power creep this because it's always a 14.6% increase to whatever value. So the stronger the character, the better this 14.6% would become. That's now a comparison of 1220 to 1398 for Chord skill 2. If let's say a new character comes, they buff attack by 2000. Then with the skill amplification, it becomes 2292, almost a 300 more attack buff. So it actually buffs more. But despite what I said, there is one annoying thing about skill amplification, and it's when you want to do crit and defense calculations. Because Lufia.net doesn't have any way of activating the skill amplification, so you have to manually calculate the crit rate increase or the defense debuff increase. Just a bit more math to do, I guess, but can I really complain? It's a buff. So I guess I have a bit of a small tip to give when using A0R0 twins and with the strategist role. So you have the skill amplification, and is that after you use the skill amplification, you want to try and use some sort of buffing move or a debuffing move. You can use like a Rakunda. Rakunda lasts for 3 turns, so you want to use Rakunda when the skill amplification is active. You don't want to use it outside of that, so that you can get more defense debuff. But of course, if you have A1, you don't need to worry about this because you're gonna have the buff every time. And I also recommend you to put twins as the first to move, so that if you're using A1, you trigger the skill amplification immediately on the first action, so that everybody on the first turn is gonna get more buffs. Of course, this applies to mostly strategist role only, because only strategist role has this skill amplification thing, which is also another reason why strategist role is very good and the best role for the twins. The last thing I want to talk about for this section is actually going to be the sweeper mode. Like I already mentioned, the sweeper mode is actually pretty decent. I want to explain a bit more why. One reason is because of the highlight. It has the Fire and Ice highlight, which I already said is the best highlight for the twin. It has an attack and damage buff for 2 turns. And you also have the Bless and Curse highlight, which is an AoE attack and also buffs themselves, the attack and crit damage. But having both active is very nice to buff the damage. This also kind of applies to the other roles. Another thing that I like about them is the ability to use 2 highlights in the fight, similar to Wonder, but unlike Wonder, the twins highlights are actually stronger and definitely worth using. For the final section of the video, should you pull Justine and Caroline? So for this section, how it works is I'm going to give you a few scenarios, and then I will give them a pull rating on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 means you should absolutely skip, 10 means you should absolutely pull. The first one is going to be, if you're a new player, if you're a returning player, and if you're a competitive player, I recommend going for A0, R0. New and returning player is simple, because if you're new and returning, you probably don't have a lot of good characters. You probably lack characters to even team build properly, and having the twins opens up to a lot of possibility for team building, because you can use them as whatever you want or whatever you need. So I definitely recommend if you're a new or returning player. If you're a competitive player, it's mostly because of covert passive. Here's the truth, right? If you're a competitive player and you don't pull for the twins, you're gonna lag behind because everybody else in the competitive scene will pull for the twins, which means that you will be at a disadvantage because you don't have the global passive. Like I already said, global passive isn't super strong, but it does make a difference, and it can also make or break a rotation because of defense debuff and the crit rate buff. If you don't care about competitive, then you can just ignore whatever I just said. But yeah, anyways, global passive aside though, H.J. RGL twin is still a solid character. They buff a lot of stuff for your team, especially for strategies, and again, you can use them as whatever you want. So for the pull rate, I give this an 8 out of 10. The next scenario is if you're lacking sustain, even if you just have one sustain, let's say you only have Marion is instanted now, right? If you have Marion only, you don't have Cherish, you don't have Samoko, I recommend you to get A1R0 twins. Because like I already mentioned, A1R0 gives you more peace of mind when it comes to sustain, because you get to use more healing skills. Other than Medic or Guardian, A1R0 is also pretty good for DPS, because A1 means that you get to use the skill tree more, which means you can do more damage. But that begs the question of, would it be better to use them as a DPS or as a support to buff your DPS? Well, it's up to you to test because I have no idea. What I mean here is that instead of running DPS twins, why not just run twins as strategies and buff your DPS? Of course, this is irrelevant if you don't have DPS. If you don't have DPS, then of course use the twins as DPS. At A1R0, they are pretty good. But if you are DPS, do you want to run twins as DPS to replace them, or run them as support to support them? Again, it's for you to test and decide. For the pull rate, 9 out of 10 to pull for A1R0 twin if you don't have good sustain. For every other player that's not included to the two scenarios I just mentioned, I still recommend the twins. Because having another option, or not even another option, having more than one option, because the twins can be anything, right, is very useful for your account. You can just run them as strategies. For a general pull rate, 7 out of 10.